Driving change in maritime. Today we do have another episode of our Vodcast. With me I have Kris Kosmala and we will talk about transforming the industry, about digitization, about optimization and a lot more topics that we will touch upon. Kris, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you very much for the invitation to have this conversation with you. This is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, welcome on the podcast. Maybe it's good for the audience to share a bit more about your background, Kris. You've been in the industry for quite a while, looking at your resume, but could you please talk us through about how you ended up where you are currently?
Yes, I don't want to add up all of the years that I spent in the industry, so let's just stick to the 20 years. All of these years were in essentially introducing digital solution or digitalization of the processes in maritime. I started in container shipping lines, then migrated to ports, then migrated to port authorities, then returned back to shipping lines, and now back with ports. So a storied history, mostly in the space of containers, but also some of this in the break bulk and bulk operations.
Yeah. I think in these years you must have seen many changes happening over time. I think if you look at that, what are the biggest changes that you have seen popping up in the industry? What are the remarkable things that you have seen?
I would say the remarkable things are the advances in technology that is being embedded into the equipment. We can now operate the equipment not just remotely by a driver, but essentially by the means of mathematical optimization and artificial intelligence. The Internet of Things on the equipment currently used in ports is significantly more advanced than it used to be even, let's say, 5-10 years ago. We are slowly we're departing essentially from comparing how automated terminal performs versus the manually or semi-automated terminal operates. We're now concentrating on essentially how to squeeze more out of the technologies that we already have in the equipment and in software to actually obtain more. This still needs some work, but at least now we have the machinery that can listen to us in a digital stream, in a mathematical stream, and actually operate more efficiently.
Okay, so basically it's about connecting all the equipment that is doing the physical handling and making sure that it is connected. And what is the role of the human in that in that automation part still?
I mean, listen, humans mastered the operational excellency, right, for a manual operation. Now our challenge is to use that human knowledge, the accumulated knowledge, into writing the code that actually makes the same decisions in the background in a digital matrix, right, if you will. We are right now at the cusp of change, which is kind of similar to what we had before ChatGPT. If you think about this, so it was with the onset of ChatGPT when we started discussing, well, could ChatGPT produce works like Shakespeare, or could it produce art like Da Vinci? That was not there before. It was nearly impossible. Now suddenly this technology actually showed up, and now there's a big discussion is saying, well, is the work of ChatGPT or related Gen AI, so generative artificial intelligence, is able to exceed or at least be on par with the human creators. Now we're talking now of operations. Before it was always, you cannot have enough human knowledge to log into a mathematical algorithm to perform operations without human interventions. And one of the classic answers, essentially, if you go into any port or any shipping line, is you think that we understand how operations happen day to day, and they all happen the same, right? And of course, somebody at the port said, no, there was no way. There's about 1,000 exceptions that happen every day in operation of the terminal, right? And they're absolutely correct. So therefore, the automation of old, driven by algorithms of old, was just simply not meeting the expectations of the customers. I mean, I don't want to recall any specific situations from any specific terminals, but I can tell you this, that we're trying to lock in human knowledge into mathematical algorithm for at least 3 decades. And we have not succeeded. But now suddenly AI crossed a threshold, and we can say now, oh, this could actually work. And we probably will not need quantum computing to generate proper decision quickly enough to act on every single occurrence of an unexpected event that we encounter day in, day out in the terminals.
And what is that? What is causing that? What is the thing that changed with Gen AI? Because AI, machine learning, has been around for a long time. So what is the essence actually that did change in this in this paradigm?
Yeah, let me just be clear. Gen AI itself, it's not doing anything for the operations of the terminal. What I'm trying to say is that the knowledge of mathematical programming, the algorithms that we are developing, we now reach the point where these algorithms are solid and they can perform actually in this highly changing, highly dynamic environment of the port. So I only use ChatGPT as an example for the creative side, right? But the Gen AI is really not something that we would use to drive operations of our cranes, operations of horizontal transports, operations of the yard cranes, and transfers through the gate. It's the advances in mathematics that are helping us. That is embedded into the algorithms that we are now using. So now it's the next step that we're waiting now for is we actually don't want to hire our own data scientists. We don't want to hire our own algorithm builders. We would like this to be embedded in software that we buy to operate the terminals, like terminal operating systems, yard optimization, crane optimization software. We would like to have it out of the box, obviously, because it is incredibly difficult to build it yourself. It's expensive, it takes time, and because every terminal is unique, we would have to expend tremendous resources inside the company, inside the terminal operation, to actually spend money on IT to get ourselves better. So that we're now waiting now for these advances to be firmly embedded into the software that is available to us.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that if you think about it, one of the things we have encountered, I have encountered many times in introducing technology into these operational environments is that people tend to trust people and are capable and able of dealing with people, even though sometimes things go differently as expected. However, once it is transformed inside of a computer, people tend to be more harsh. They tend to be very more expressive, saying like, it's not working, it will not work, it will never work, predicting it to the future. How do you feel like this change in AI, or what AI is bringing at this point in time, is different from the other technologies?
I mean, listen, there's no way to replace a human-to-human communication. I mean, why do we trust each other? Let's say in a one-on-one conversation, I'm looking at your face, I'm looking at your body language, I am looking at your behavior, I'm listening to the cadence of the speech that you're making, right? We build the trust. Of course, we exchange little things, pieces of information, which confirm that I actually know what I'm talking about, and you actually confirm that you understand what I'm talking about, right? And it's applicable to solving your problem. We have no such relationship with a computer program, with the algorithm. We cannot observe it. There's no body language. We cannot see whether this thing is smirking at us or whether it's actually making a very well thought out a face. We're saying, I'm really thinking about it, right? So we cannot change this, and you cannot interrogate an algorithm and saying, what do you think? We're not there yet, right? Or why did you arrive to this particular decision? Because it mathematically arrived to this decision, but we cannot say, hey, wait a second, stop here. Why did you do this? Why did you decide that these two cranes operating on a single block should actually not approach each other within less than 7 meters, let's say, right? And will that change? Yeah, maybe, possibly. But what it is actually now we have a greater control over the algorithms that are actually driving that behavior of the machinery. That is making us more trusting what the computer is deciding for us to do. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is something that is playing out very differently in very different cultures. So, for instance, you can see in the United States, for instance, East Coast, right? There is a total disbelief that a human can be replaced. It's not just a matter of protecting the jobs, but also saying the humans are just simply much more intelligent in the terminal environment than the technology ever will be. That's combining the software and the hardware, right? But in some other cultures, it's much easier to actually accept that this is happening. You see it in Asia to a great extent. There was fantastic examples of the ports in Asia which actually moved much faster, and they're much farther ahead, let's say, comparing to the American ports. But this needs to be now propagated around the world. That is, we need to find a way to show these good examples and to say they're operating as good as humans. That is the algorithms and the software. It will be very difficult to overcome this, and I realize that partially it's a cultural issue. But we have definitely advanced now with both the theoretical knowledge of what mathematics can do and what AI can do for us, and also we have advanced in terms of intelligence of the machinery itself. So that was not there before, right? You had maybe 50 sensors on a crane. Now we have 500 sensors on a crane. It's a very, very similar situation to Boeing versus Airbus, right? When you're looking at 8,000 sensors, let's say, for a simple operation of the wing versus 80 sensors before, okay? So now we can actually imagine that eventually, you could guess, maybe AI could be the pilot of the plane because it receives information from so many more data points than before. Our cranes operating on the berth, operating in the yard, operating at the gate, they also have significantly more technology of the sensor technology that has been embedded. The next step that we're very close to is embedding artificial intelligence onto the machinery. This is the edge. We refer to this as an edge AI. Again, we could not operate a small footprint AI in the past, but that's the past. The modern thing is that we can now operate in a much smaller footprint of CPU and the RAM, and actually exchange the decisions on the machine at the edge. That is a huge progress for us.
I get that point. That is bringing power to where the decisions need to be made, right? And that is the real power of the edge computing. Not having to connect everything, but also having the local knowledge on that part.
Correct. It is very difficult Yes, in a terminal, it's very difficult to make decision by observing something on a camera. There are things on the ground that are happening at a very high speed, which is impossible to capture by CCTV or even a high live video stream. We just simply don't have enough of that visibility. So Edge AI, which is the machine or the AI embedded directly onto the machine, is going to be the next step. This is where the machine will be able to decide this without the human observing this from a kilometer away.
One more question, which I really found interesting, is also you mentioned, you've been traveling the world. You have been doing implementations all around the world. You mentioned the different cultures that you see around the world and different ways of using technology and accepting what technology is bringing to the table. Yet, if we think about logistics, if we think about the whole maritime industry, it's really a global industry where we are connecting local cultural nodes with other local cultural nodes with a lot of dependencies. How do you see that play that out? Will it become a kind of culture which is on top of and making use of the different cultures that it's embedded in? So is the company actually the driving force, or is it the collaboration in a different manner that will facilitate that? What is your take on that one?
I think it's really the company. When you think about this, we do have a few terminal operators, global terminal operators, which are learning fast. They are experimenting, just like Amazon, essentially in the past. They are not afraid to take some risks. If we call the names, it's somebody like DP World, PSA, Singaporean operator. I would say maybe even we can add Hutchison to this, and there will be more of these operators, right? Because we actually have more companies in this space. They do have money, they have access to technology, and they have willingness to experiment, using either their own resources or smartly embedding external resources to help their internal people. And I would say that is going to be the key factor in propagation of the different approach to run the terminals to the rest of the world. Because when you think about many of the very large ports, you're looking at ports, a landlord model, when there is a number of terminal operators operating in the same port. Yep. And I can guarantee you that even though we're competing against each other, so DP World having terminal in the same port where APMT is operating, they are dead set competitors. However, they're also watching each other of what they are doing, what each one of them is doing with the technology, which one is them experimenting with something else. It somehow filters through the network. And therefore, one terminal operator operating in a particular multi-terminal operator port can actually drive positive change with the remaining operators. Okay? And you've seen this in Long Beach, you've seen this in LA. They're good examples, right? Over there, what is happening over there. We have not had similar ports maybe on the East Coast of the United States. In Europe, obviously the big story is everybody's watching what operators of the terminals in Rotterdam are doing and in Antwerp. Now Hamburg will be probably catching up, having this big investment by MSC. And obviously in Asia, we're watching what Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Singapore are doing, because this is where the great amount of innovation is happening in a positive way.
What I found interesting is the three companies you mentioned, DP World, PSA, and Hutchison, are terminal operators. They are not the shipping lines. Is that by accident that you use those examples, or is there a difference? What is the driving model between a shipping line and a terminal?
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting, right? It's like thinking, oh my God, I should have been talking about Hanseatic, which is the old Hapag-Lloyd terminal operator, right? But I think if you're independent operator, which means you're aiming to serve any shipping line, and that's DP World, that's Hutchison, that's PSA, even APMT. In fact, we're thinking APMT being part of Maersk, but the APMT actually runs a number of ports, which are terminals in ports where they're open to anybody who will call on them. And I would say that there's probably more desire to please multiple customers. If you're a terminal operator, which is more intricately tied into the operation of the shipping line, okay, you probably only concentrate on satisfying that shipping line. Therefore, your innovation may not be as broad or as aggressive as, let's say, if you're serving multiple shipping lines in your terminal. Okay, it's not to say that there will be no innovation related to the captive terminal operators, which are related to the carriers. Okay.
No, that's clear. But it was kind of interesting that you mentioned that one. I think we've been talking a lot about what technology is bringing to the table, the mathematical optimization, the capabilities that have been developed. On the other hand, we also do have this discussion of sustainability. Do you see that as a driving force in the industry and what is happening in the maritime industry at this point in time? Is this the thing that will also help change?
Yes, it will help the change, but you have to remember that terminal is a business operation. There's a profit and loss company, right? So we operate like a business. The gains that we experience, let's say, in sustainability, contribution to global warming by reducing the carbon emissions and so on in ports, that's important, but that is not the key driver. The key driver is really to increase your profit, the net margin contributions from your operations. And that means that sustainability is still going to actually improve. So essentially, the environmental impact of the ports is going to get reduced because of the technology that we're using, but we're using this technology really primarily to improve ourselves in terms of the bottom line, right? Yeah. So for instance, a better operation of the cranes at the berth means we can release the vessel faster, right? And releasing vessel faster means that we can clear up the berth and prepare for the next ship, which means they do not wait. They do not sit in the anchorage, right? Yep. Therefore, emissions are reduced. Okay. Now, we all would like to experience the ideal world of aviation. The just-in-time arrival is a big thing, right? If the ship comes in just in time and the port service is already just in time and the terminal is ready just in time, nobody waits. There is no wasted cycles. There is no pollution. There is no environmental impact. However, we are very far away from this. If you look at the statistics right now, most of the ships coming into ports are delayed. I'll say 50-50. Chances are that the 50% of the ships are going to off schedule. That creates problems at the terminal, the scheduling of the berths, scheduling of the equipment, scheduling of the people. When you have these problems, emissions increase, consumption of energy increases, people time consumption increases. So we're making the gains regarding the sustainability, or what we broadly define as sustainability of the port operations. But until we can fix it, so everything kind of comes in and happens on time, and there's no waste of energy in a process of waiting, we are probably not going to see sustainability as the key driving force behind changes that we're seeing in the port and the terminal environment.
On that part, I'm with you. I think on the operational perspective or the financial perspective, that is going to be hard. But I think it could be different if legislation kicks in and there are constraints being put on year over improving because it's the license
this could
to
be.
operate which is connected.
Let me give you an example. Right? So let's imagine you're operating RTGs in your yard. Right, so this is diesel-operated RTGs. Let's imagine that 50% of the ships coming into your port are delayed; they're off schedule. Now, what is happening? We pre-organize containers in the yard in such a way that when the ship is in, we can quickly discharge the containers from the ship and put it into empty positions in our import yard, and quickly load up the vessel from the containers arranged in the zones in the export yard, right? Now, what is happening when the ship comes in late? We have some parcels that actually have to be changed, which means we have to perform number of what we call empty moves when we rearrange the containers again because the vessel schedule has been delayed. Right?
Yep.
And therefore, all of these empty moves generate cost for us, but sustainability-wise, they generate consumption of energy.
Yep.
Either electrical energy or diesel or anything. Emissions increase. Yep. So therefore, the behavior of the port, of the terminal, here will not be driven, there's a reduction of empty moves, will not be driven by the fact that we would like to reduce our environmental impact. We are reducing this only because we were better prepared, rearranging these containers in a series of empty moves, okay? Moving containers around, preparing them for a vessel that has been delayed. If all of the vessels suddenly start coming on time, every time, you will see tremendous impact on sustainability because the consumption, the emissions from the terminal will actually decrease dramatically.
Yeah, and I think that is part of the game, right? Being more predictable in when vessels will arriving. It's a big connected system. From the perspective of the terminal, I think there is one level above, which is the port call, which is the involvement of all these stakeholders, even the departure port. So there are a lot of dots connected on that part. Kris, I want to wrap up, but maybe a last question for you. And I ask this question often, is like, is there something that a lot of people do not understand about the industry and that they should understand that is not seen? Is there anything that you want to give the audience an insight in based on your experience?
I don't want to sound like a person who says, hey, people, you don't understand, you have to understand. But I think a lot of people just see the nice pictures from the distance, big ships coming into port, big cranes moving the boxes on, off. It all looks kind of organized, okay? You don't see sometimes, let's use the word chaos and panic. Those are probably the wrong words, but essentially there's the occurrence of the events that are affecting everything when you're looking at something very, very close, okay? Yeah. And I have to say is that when you say, oh, we have 60 vessels waiting to enter the port, to come to berth, okay? You don't understand that there is a tremendous effort that goes into making sure that the 60 vessels come in. But it's sometimes it requires a lot of decisions taken by the terminal ad hoc, okay? And that's the big issue where the automation hits the reality, right? Automation operates better when things are predicted mathematically. If they are not, then things get out of sequence. And this is where we have the moment, the typical moment of truth right now in the terminal is if you have an automated terminal and something goes wrong, do the humans switch switch off automation and go to the manual mode, which is deciding based on the human experience, or they try to frantically tell the technology to fix itself, the self-learning algorithm, right? Until we have guarantee that we have a technology like this available to everybody, to every terminal, in every port, we are going to experience situations where we will have more of these unexpected events affecting us. But you should not be looking just at the number of ships waiting for the port to accept those ships in, because you're generating wrong impression, because you're thinking the port is lazy, the terminals are not operating efficiently, there's something wrong with the port itself, and so on. That is not true. Okay, there is a lot of effort that goes in every day, every hour, to fix the stream, to fix the flows. And if we can have a magical AI to help us with this, fantastic for the ports.
Yeah, and I think it's really nice. On the one hand, you say like this machine looks like going very smooth, and on the other hand, there is a reality where people are still fixing a lot of problems and making sure that the perception or the view of this it's still a smooth running machine, even though there are big things happening in the industry. Boxes are being delivered everywhere. Cargo is being moved around the globe, and I think that is what we should take into account. Kris, I really would like to thank you for the interview. I really had an interesting conversation, learned a lot of new things again, and thank you for this.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks for a great discussion.
Kris, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, bye.